This session is the 3rd through 5th grade reading comprehension interventions session. This is aligned with the MTSS interventions for Tier 2 and 3. And more information can be found in the Austin ISD MTSS manual for that. And so here is our small but mighty upper elementary literacy team. Myself, my name is Kelly Marino. I'm an academic coaching specialist for upper elementary literacy. My colleague Manuel is on the line. You want to give a wave? There he is. He's our academic coaching specialist for upper elementary bilingual literacy. Also joining us this afternoon is Melanie Kirchhoff, who is our fabulous K-5 social studies expert. And when we talk about knowledge building in upper elementary, social studies is your best friend. So you want to be there for that. Of course, our director is Liliana Kendrick. She's our director of elementary humanities. She's also on this call. So we'll be covering what is reading comprehension, and we'll be covering what qualifying students for reading comprehension interventions, how to administer the DIBELS or the IDEL screeners, which are the ones that we use for reading comprehension. We will also go over planning the intervention lessons using 3 main resources, which are the Read and Respond journals, the Rigby Readers Take and Teach lessons, and the foundational skills lessons. And we will also cover progress monitoring. Again, these 5 components are what we will be covering. If you get lost in this slideshow, please come back to this. This is slide 5, and these have links to take you to each of the 5 sections. At the end of each section, we'll be taking a short 4-minute pause and ponder break. And that is a time where you can discuss with your partners and on your campus, reflect on your own, or take any kind of breaks that you need to be away from the screen for a couple of minutes. So let's set out let's start the learning by ground and level setting around what is reading comprehension. So to dig into reading comprehension, it's really important to understand the simple view of reading. And this is something that a lot of our lower elementary teachers have become very familiar with during our, because of the Science of Teaching Reading and the reading academies. And many of you up here in the upper grades, especially my 4th and 5th grade teachers, this is something that might be new learning for you. So let's look at the simple view of reading.
When we think about the essential skills children need to build their reading brain, Goff and Tunmer's model, known as the simple view of reading, is quite helpful. In this model, the critical sub-skills of reading are simplified to their essential categories, decoding and language comprehension, and framed as a multiplication equation, with reading comprehension as the product, or goal, on the right side of the equation. The idea is this: strong reading comprehension results only when both decoding and language comprehension are strong. To illustrate this idea, let's assign values of 0 for weak and 1 for strong. If decoding is weak and assigned a value of 0, and language comprehension is strong, a value of 1, reading comprehension is weak because 0 multiplied by 1 is 0. Conversely, if language comprehension is weak but decoding is strong, reading comprehension still suffers. 1 times 0 is 0. Only when both domains on the left side of the equation are strong does reading comprehension become a strong 1, because 1 times 1 is 1. This simple view of reading tells us that children need to learn essential skills to decode to get text off the page, while also developing their understanding of the world and of literacy. Although reading is a complex process, this simple view is helpful because all of the essential sub-skills of reading, such as phonological awareness and vocabulary, can be assigned to the decoding and language comprehension domains on the left side of the equation.
Okay. So let's look at that graphic in a still spot. So here we look at the simple view of reading, where we have decoding on the left-hand side, which is your ability to apply sound symbol relationships to read words. And this is typically what we think of as being our foundational skills instruction. And a lot of that is done in our K through 2 classrooms very, very extensively. And this is where structured literacy comes into play, where students are learning phonological awareness, sound letter knowledge, and sight recognition. You notice fluency begins in that area. So fluency goes across the whole bar. When we think about reading comprehension, we typically say reading comprehension, but what we're really talking about is language comprehension in the upper grades, which is our ability to understand spoken language. And those components are broken down into background knowledge, vocabulary, language structures, verbal reasoning, and literacy knowledge. You notice that fluency underscores all of these skills. It's only when fluency brings them all together for us. It's really important for us as upper grade teachers to understand where our space comes into play when we're talking about the simple view of reading. And these big structures in blue, these are the ones that we're going to focus on when we're thinking about intervention. If you need it in an even simpler format, we can think about the main components of language comprehension as falling into 3 big buckets. One being fluency, which is where I can apply my decoding, prosody, accuracy, and expression to read text in a natural and effortless way. And I'm sure you've all experienced this before. As you have students reading, you can just hear it. It just sounds like they're speaking. That is what we're really aiming for, that nice, fluent language. The second group would be vocabulary, which is understanding meaning of the words in context. Now, this is not just knowing a bunch of vocabulary or being able to list definitions of things, understand, but it's really thinking about vocabulary in context of the text that we are encountering on a day-to-day basis. Can I parse out the meanings of words using the skills that I have? And then the big bucket that everybody wants to talk about is comprehension. And comprehension is more than just answering questions. It's about using my experiences and knowledge of the world, morphology, that's how words are put together, vocabulary, that's what things mean, language structure, and my reading strategies to make sense of text. This is a big bucket. And if we don't understand all of the components that come together with it and how it all builds on each other, just like it said in the video, if we don't have all the pieces, we're going to end up playing a zero-sum game. If you are really interested in delving into more information about the components of literacy, I encourage you to check out this Reading Rockets site that Melanie just linked in the chat. And right now would be a great time to do that. This is our first pause and ponder break. So take time in your teams to discuss and reflect on the question, how does this understanding of reading comprehension either support or shift maybe how you teach reading? The next section on qualifying students for intervention will begin in 4 minutes. I hope that pause and ponder time was helpful for your team to process some of the information that the first section had about reading comprehension. So let's start the second part of our session, which is about qualifying students. Properly qualifying students for reading comprehension specific intervention is incredibly important. If you jump into reading comprehension without the necessary foundational skills, you will create a lot of frustration for not only yourself as the teacher when you see a student not making progress, but a lot of frustration for the student who's not going to feel as successful when they feel like they're working so hard. It's very important that we level set and remind ourselves about the overall AISD MTSS intervention plan and understand the tiers of instruction before we continue our conversation. So we're going to watch a video. If you like to follow along and see the details, please click on the presentation PDF link, which is in the chat, and I'm going to begin the video.
Welcome. We are committed to implementing the multi-tiered system of support MTSS in the language arts classroom. At Austin ISD, our mission is to equip every student with the knowledge and skills they need to thrive in college, career, and life. Through the MTSS framework, we are dedicated to providing every student with tailored instruction and support systems. Let's embark on this journey to enhance learning for every child. MTSS is a three-tiered system meeting the needs of all students. The tiers of support are a big part of MTSS. The intensity grows from one level to the next. We will review each component of the flowchart, starting with Tier 1 instruction. The classroom teacher delivers Tier 1 instruction, which offers universal, high-quality teaching to all students using evidence-based practices and utilizing evidence-based practices and differentiated strategies. Regular assessments help track students' academic progress, enabling data-driven adjustments in teaching. Tier 1 ensures inclusivity for all students and forms the basis for identifying those who need extra support in Tiers 2 and 3. Within Tier 1, teachers should customize instruction for students and use various forms of student grouping to ensure mastery of learning. The Austin Independent School District uses the NWEA MAP Growth Reading Screener to assess students' adherence to grade-level standards. This assessment is conducted 3 times throughout the year, at the beginning, middle, and end. Following the assessment, campus staff will hold structured data meetings to pinpoint student needs and create instructional plans. Students who score below the 30th percentile in English or below the 40th percentile in Spanish on the MAP Growth Reading Screener will be considered as below the benchmark. When students score below benchmark, a child study team meeting using multiple data points will verify their need for intervention. Before students receive any Tier 2 interventions, they will be given a diagnostic. The CST committee will create a plan for the student, identifying the intervention resource and intervention provider. Tier 2 groups should be progress monitored biweekly. If, at the next MAP Growth Screener, the student is at or above the benchmark, they can exit to less intensive instruction. If the student is still below the benchmark, the CST team will determine if the student will continue the current intervention, transition to intensive intervention, or be considered for referral to special education. Tier 3 is an intensive intervention typically required for about 5% of students who demonstrate significant and persistent learning needs. At this level, interventions are more individualized and intensive. They are matched to student needs, which may mean providing scaffold instruction that addresses prior grade level TEKS. A goal must be set in ECST for the student, and intensive intervention must be provided. Providers of Tier 3 intervention should be trained in the intervention platform and strategies, and they are most highly qualified to deliver intensive intervention. Within Tier 3 intervention, group size is reduced to 1 to 4 students, and the frequency and duration of the intervention increases. The intervention provider must progress monitor weekly to determine student response and allow for timely decision-making. Once sufficient data has been collected, the CST committee determines whether intensive intervention is meeting a student's needs, needs more adaptations, or if a referral to special education needs to be made. In this model, we observe an inverted triangle representing the distribution of students' performance levels. The majority of students are identified as performing below grade level standards. Unlike the previous model, a large portion of the class requires scaffold instruction to reach grade level standards. Therefore, the guidelines for instruction may need to be adjusted accordingly. We will start by thoroughly examining each element of the flowchart, commencing with Tier 1 instruction in the form of an inverted triangle. It's crucial to ensure that students receive highly explicit and systematic instruction, along with the necessary scaffolds and acceleration in Tier 1. For further details, please consult the walkthrough form. All students will receive Tier 1 instruction from the classroom teacher, just like the standard triangle. All students must receive strong, explicit, and systematic instruction, along with scaffolds and acceleration, due to the composition of class levels. Remember that Tier 2 interventions are designed for students who require a higher level of support. Students who score below the 30th percentile in English or below the 40th percentile in Spanish on the MAP Growth Reading Screener are below the benchmark. When students score below benchmark, a child study team meeting, using multiple data points, will verify their need for intervention. Before students receive any Tier 2 interventions, they will be given a diagnostic. Teachers must adjust their approach based on capacity and available resources. While ECST documentation is not mandatory, it remains vital to continuously monitor the progress of students in Tier 2 to guarantee that their needs are being addressed and that the interventions are producing the desired results. In the traditional MTSS triangle, Tier 3 represents intensive interventions for a small number of students. However, a campus with an inverted triangle will have a large number of students identified through MAP growth needing intensive support. Therefore, depending on capacity and resources, campuses will need to respond accordingly. This diagram dissects the intensive Tier 3 inverted triangle into 3 parts and provides guidance on how to respond, intervene, and document progress. The top 2/3 of students in Tier 3 will receive intensive instruction and progress monitoring. The bottom 1/3 of the class is required to be documented in ECST. If adequate progress fails to be made, then a referral for an evaluation will be considered by the CST committee. We are going to address the tiers in a dual-language classroom. In a dual-language classroom, students will take the NWEA MAP Growth Reading Screener to assess their adherence to grade-level standards. Kindergarten students will be assessed in Spanish, while students in grades 1 to 5 will be assessed in both English and Spanish. This assessment occurs 3 times a year, at the beginning, middle, and end. After the assessment, school staff will have structured data meetings to identify student needs and create instructional plans. Students will be considered at benchmark if they meet the expectations in either language. However, students who score below the 30th percentile in English and the 40th percentile in Spanish in both languages scored below the benchmark. When students score below the benchmark, a child study team meeting, using multiple data points, will verify their need for intervention. Before receiving Tier 2 and 3 interventions, students will undergo a diagnostic assessment in both English and Spanish. The CST committee will then create a plan for the student, identifying the intervention resource and provider. Therefore, teachers must adjust their approach based on their capabilities and available resources. While ECST documentation may not be mandatory, it is important to continuously monitor students' progress in both languages to ensure that their needs are being addressed and that the interventions produce the desired results based on the languages of the intervention. To best support dual language students, please consult the guidance documents for grades 1 and 2, as well as grades 3 to 5, to provide effective intervention in the languages that meet the students' needs. As we conclude, it's important to emphasize that the key to effective implementation lies in our unwavering commitment to continuous monitoring and adapting our strategies to meet students' evolving needs. Whether you are implementing the standard or inverse triangle model, strong explicit instruction, scaffolding, and regular progress checks are essential. As we progress, consider how you can actively foster collaboration among teachers and specialists to amplify our collective impact on student learning. Let's prioritize open communication and data sharing to guarantee that every student's needs are met and receive the support they need to thrive. Welcome. We are committed to Welcome.
Okay. So that was a lot of information. We know that. And you've probably heard it a couple of times today, but it bears repeating because we really want to build up this system and structure within our district so that we are providing supports to students in a very strategic way. So thinking about our upper elementary classrooms, there are three main types of specialized instruction that we provide within the Reading Language Arts classroom. The first one is differentiation. This is a tier 1 scaffold. It's for all students. Even students who are in intervention receive differentiation through tier 1 instruction. Our specialized differentiation takes place during differentiated small group time, which should be around 45 minutes of every day. It is delivered by the teacher, and this is very flexible grouping based on observed student need. So these are not set groups, these are not fixed groups, this is flexible grouping based on observed student need. And these supports are directly aligned with the Tier 1 instruction and use the differentiated small group section of the UPO to plan. If you want a deep dive into what differentiated small group instruction for Reading Language Arts is, please see this video that's linked on the presentation or from our curriculum videos link. The second type of specialized instruction that we find in upper elementary is acceleration. This is also a tier 1 level support. It is only for 4th and 5th grade students who did not pass STAR and qualify under House Bill 4545-1416. It also takes place during the differentiated small group time or in a time designated by the campus, because sometimes you have like a tutoring time or summer school sometimes can count as this. It can be delivered by the teacher or a tutor. And this is a fixed grouping of no more than 4 students for a total of 30 hours during the school year. These supports are also aligned with Tier 1 instruction, but they are designed to increase student growth on STAR. So we're going to use them in a little bit of a different way. More information about how to schedule your acceleration block is going to be coming. But the piece we are going to talk about right now is specifically your intervention block. This is the only type of specialized instruction that falls in your tier 2 or 3 category. And it is for students who qualify based on the guidance in the MTSS plan. You just saw that video, right? So we're going to go through that. It takes place during the intervention time. So students in intervention will receive differentiation. They might also receive acceleration during tier 1, and then they will receive intervention during the intervention block. It can be delivered by the teacher or by an interventionist. It is a fixed group based on determined need from diagnostic assessments and the ECST meeting or committee. And these supports are aligned to student need, either in foundational skills or reading comprehension as needed. It's really important to keep that focus on where these different types of specialized instruction lie, and the type of grouping it is, and who can be delivering that. So I want you to think back to the simple view of reading video. And we're going to apply what we learned in that video to this quadrant chart here. So on the left-hand side of the chart, this would be where word recognition is low. Moving to the right is where word recognition is high. At the bottom of the chart is where language comprehension is low. So we move up the chart, that's where language comprehension is high. And I want you to notice that in all cases where word recognition or decoding, a difficulty is noticed on the left-hand side of the chart, those students should be prioritized into foundational skills intervention, even in the upper grades, especially in the upper grades. Only students who have adequate or strong decoding skills, but a difficulty in language comprehension should be receiving reading comprehension interventions. And this is really vitally important Because if we think about that equation, if we don't have a strong foundation, if students do not have the strong foundational skills, we do not have enough to build on to work towards reading comprehension mastery. So we have to set the strong foundation and make sure that that is taken care of before moving forward. Now, for some of our upper elementary students, like a 5th grade student, it might not be all of the foundational skills. They might have some very unique gaps that can be revealed through diagnostic testing. So we could intervene strategically in those places, close that gap for foundational skills, and then move towards reading comprehension interventions. But don't automatically assume in 3rd through 5th grade that we're going to jump straight into reading comprehension interventions. We have to properly qualify students for the intervention that's going to make the most impact on their educational experience. So how do we do that? We're going to walk through an English example, or the English flowcharts first. Then we're going to focus on the Spanish flowcharts. So one language at a time, just to keep things simple. So if I have a student in 3rd through 5th grade who scores below 30% on the MAP reading benchmark assessment, that will automatically flag them. And I'm going to have a child study meeting. And in that child study meeting, we can decide, you know what, we want more information on this student to see if we're going to do tier 2 or tier 3 intervention. And so I'm going to go back and I'm going to administer the DIBELS oral reading fluency and Maze screeners to check for grade level fluency. This is my first step with 3rd through 5th grade students. If the student meets minimum grade level fluency measures, then we know that foundational skills are not an issue, and we can move forward with reading comprehension interventions. If, however, the student does not meet minimum grade level fluency measures, then we have to take another step to determine if foundational skills is the core problem. And so we would administer the core phonics survey as a diagnostic. This checks our foundational skills. If the core phonics survey comes up as the student is proficient with foundational skills, then we can still go ahead and deliver reading comprehension interventions. If not, and there's not proficiency with foundational skills, then we backtrack to foundational skills and deliver those interventions using the UFly resource. So there are 2 paths towards reading comprehension interventions, and there are 2 paths that send us on another journey. Now, you might be thinking like, okay, well, what are the grade level minimums? So Melanie or Manuel is going to drop the AIC fluency rates chart in the chat here in just a second. And the information on this page here is just for 3rd grade. So I can see here that I'm going to follow the same process. If I'm below 30%, I administer the screener, the DIBELS Orphan Maze. If I meet, then I go to reading comprehension. If I don't meet, I go to core phonics. I administer the core phonics. If I'm good, I go to reading comprehension. If I'm not proficient, I go to foundational skills intervention. And you'll notice here the 3rd grade minimums. These are the minimums. So 83 words per minute, 96% accuracy, and a score of 8 on the maze. And we're going to go over the details of this scoring. So don't freak out about these numbers yet. Just understand that they're here. And here's 4th grade. It's the same information, just tailored for 4th grade and 5th grade. So then when we look at Spanish, we're going to follow the same process, but we have some different diagnostics to use. Really, they just have different names. They're really the same diagnostics and the same screeners as we have for English. That's a benefit of being in the upper grades, right? A lot of our materials are very similar. So if I have a student in 3rd through 5th grade who scores below 40% on the MAP Spanish reading benchmark assessment, I'm going to meet with my child study team. If they say, yes, let's go investigate this farther, I'm going to administer the IDEL, which is the Fluide Oral de Lectura, or the FLO, and the Qual Palabra, which is a CP, to check grade level fluency. And these 2 assessments are directly aligned with the ORF and the MAIS from DIBELS. If the student meets the minimum grade level fluency measures, then you deliver reading comprehension interventions. Same as before, if the student does not meet the minimum grade level fluency measures, then we are going to administer the folleto de pruebas del estudiante from the El Próximo Paso al Éxito as a diagnostic. And this diagnostic, just like the core phonics screener, checks for foundational skills. Just like we did before for the English, if the student demonstrates proficiency with foundational skills, then we deliver reading comprehension interventions. And if not, then we will deliver foundational skills using the El Camino al Éxito or the El Próximo Paso al Éxito. So just like English, we have 2 paths that lead towards reading comprehension interventions and 2 paths that send us to foundational skills. This is the same information as before, but now we're tailoring it for each grade level. So here's 3rd grade. You'll notice that the Spanish words per minute rates are lower than English, and that just has to do with the large number of multisyllabic words in Spanish. So it just causes you to read less words per minute. So here we've got 3rd grade, then 4th grade, then 5th grade. So this presentation will only focus on the DIBELS and the IDEL assessments and the reading comprehension interventions. If you need information about the core phonics survey, about the UFLY interventions, about the folleto de pruebas del estudiante assessment, about El Camino al Éxito, about El Próximo Paso al Éxito, then I highly recommend you go attend one of those sessions or search out the information for those sessions in the MTSS conference manual or conference guide, conference guide, in the conference guide. Okay, so, and I see someone's raised their hand. We actually have a Q&A document that's been linked in the chat. And so I will send you to, if you have any questions at all, please go to the Q&A document. The reason we didn't open the chat for everyone is because with over 200 participants, it would get very, very wild in there. So please go to the Q&A document and we will give you thorough answers in that document. So before we end this qualifying section, we're going to do a little case study. So I'm going to pose a scenario and give you a chance to answer with your team and check your understanding. So here we go. Beatrice Bear is a 4th grade student. She took the MAP reading test in September and received an achievement score of 26%. Through classroom observations, the teacher notices that she frequently waits to respond to questions until after she hears a classmate first. During partner reading, she demonstrates decent decoding skills, but sometimes her prosody is unclear or can sound choppy. What should the teacher's next step be for this student? So I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to respond in your groups. And then we'll look at the answer. If you and your team said that the teacher's next step was to administer the DIBELS, ORF, and MAIS assessments, you are correct. Because our achievement score is only 26%, She's below the benchmark of 30%. And the only other information I have is anecdotal notes and observation. So I want to make sure that I'm backing up those observations with qualitative data. So our scenario continues. When Beatrice Bear is given the 4th grade Dibbles oar, she reads 89 words per minute with a 90% accuracy rate. On the maze, Beatrice scores an 8.0. And here are the 4th grade the minimums, just so you can compare what did she get towards what the minimums are. Remember, it's the beginning of the year, September. So what should the teacher's next step be for this student? My colleagues are sitting in here going, I know, I know. Let's see if you were correct in your teams. Since Beatrice does not meet grade level fluency minimums, the teacher must check for proficiency with foundational skills before moving forward with reading comprehension interventions. This might be a new step for you. We are typically gone from like map testing straight to interventions. And we are trying to really make sure that we are following all that we need to do. We're collecting all the information we need so that not only can we provide the interventions, but provide the correct interventions. And Beatrice was close on those grade level fluency minimums. So even if a student is close, take the time to go check. You never know what kind of strange gaps our upper elementary students will have with foundational skills. Okay, last part. Beatrice Bear scores proficient on the core phonics survey, so hooray. This indicates that she does not have any significant gaps in her foundational skill knowledge. What should the teacher's next step be for this student? If you said establish grouping and develop an intervention plan for reading comprehension, you are correct, right? So we cleared foundational skills off of the list of possible issues that Beatrice was having. And so we are going to move forward with reading comprehension. And just remember, she wasn't quite at her grade level minimums for fluency, because that might come into play if we talk about her later when we think about progress monitoring. Before we move on to section 3 on administering the Dibbles and IDEL, I would like you to take 4 minutes to pause and ponder and think about your students. What steps do you need to take to qualify them for interventions? I'm sure at this point you've taken MAP, you have your little miniature list of kids. So start thinking, knowing this information now, what are some things you need to do? What are some steps you need to take with them? Okay. Thank you for engaging with that pause and ponder. So at this point, you might be wondering, what are all these assessments and that we're using to check these grade level minimums for fluency and comprehension? Because we know that MAP gives us a RIT score and it gives us an achievement percentile, but for a small portion of students, remember our tiers, right? We're talking about students in tier 2, students in tier 3 that qualify. That RIT score and achievement percentile don't give us enough personalized information to make smart decisions about what the next steps forward need to be. So DIBELS is an English assessment, and IDEL is the Spanish assessment equivalent of DIBELS. So sometimes I'm going to give you both titles, and sometimes I'm going to kind of swap between them. So I apologize for that. But you can if you can just set your mind that DIBELS and IDEL, the two assessments that we're using are the same assessments, just in different language. So this video only talks about them in reference to DIBELS, but you can apply the same things to the ORF is equivalent to the FLO, and the MAISE is equivalent to the Quad Palabra.
Oral reading fluency is a standardized, individually administered measure of students' accuracy and fluency with connected text. So this measure assesses a student's ability to read words in connected text and provides a great indicator of students' reading comprehension as well, with the idea that if a student is able to read fluently, they can devote attention to the meaning of the text. This measure is administered from the fall of first grade through the spring of 8th grade, so we now go up to middle school. And students for this measure read a passage aloud for 1 minute, and then their score is determined by the number of words they've read correctly within 1 minute and their accuracy percentage, which can be calculated through the DIBELS data system. MAISE is a standardized group-administered measure of reading comprehension that's administered from the fall of 2nd grade through the spring of 8th grade. And for this measure, students are given a passage that has every 7th word removed and replaced with 3 options, and the student needs to choose the best option of those 3. In 3rd through 8th grade, the first and last sentence are left intact, and in 2nd grade, the first 2 sentences and last sentence are left intact. Students' score on this measure is determined by the number of MAISE words that they've selected correctly, and this measure takes about 5 minutes to administer per classroom. Oral reading fluency is a
Okay, so so that's just a very broad overview of those two pieces of the DIBELS that we are going to be using as part of our qualifying students for reading comprehension interventions. Manuel and I have worked to put all of these materials in specific grade level documents and folders so that you can kind of simplify the process because DIBELS has a lot of pieces, especially for third grade, and we are only using 2 of the pieces per our intervention plan. So please click on these resources for your grade level. So they're structured with the explicit directions are the beginning of the document, a scoring guide if you need a scoring guide or a scoring document, and then they're separated by beginning of year, middle of year, end of year with teacher and student materials in each of those sections. So you should be able to print out one copy and just have that your teacher copy, and then you make copies for students for the pieces that you need. So there's your access, and the DIBELS folders are in the chat, so you can access them from right there if you would like to. So let's walk through each of these assessments one at a time. So the first assessment we're going to walk through is the oral reading fluency, or the ORF. So if you hear people say, just give them an ORF, this is what they're talking about. And in Spanish, that would be the Fluidez de Lectura Oral, or the FLO. And there are 4 big steps for administering an ORF. And that is step 1, you gather the ORF or the FLO passage for the correct grade level and time of year. Step 2, you sit with the student one-on-one and follow the directions in the guide, which we're going to go over in a moment. Step 3, the student reads the passage for 1 minute while you mark errors. And it's only 1 minute. So as soon as the minute is up, you just ask the student to stop. And then step 4 is you score the ORF or the FLO for words per minute and accuracy percentage. And you can follow the directions in the guide, give you some specific scoring guidelines. So just 4 steps. Get your materials, sit with the student one-on-one, student reads for 1 minute, then you score it. If you have never seen ORF teacher and student materials before, and they look the same for the FLO, the teacher page, which you'll see on the left here, is just 1 page. It has your notes at the top. It has some hints, hot tips at the top. The passage is clearly written with the number of words per line marked on the right-hand side, and then some scoring guidance on the very bottom. In the opposite way, on the right-hand side, you'll see the student version, which just is the passage, written the way a passage should be written. So there is that. So we're going to watch a short 1-minute video just showing a teacher administering an ORF with a student. Maybe.
Please read this out loud. If you get stuck, I will tell you the word so you can keep reading. When I say stop, I may ask you to tell me about what you read, so do your best reading. Start here.
Bobby.
Ready? Begin.
Bobby was on his way home from school one day. On his walk, he saw something green in the snow. He stopped and stared. He thought he was seeing things green in the snow. It could be what it seemed to be, could it? He bent down in the snow and quickly dug it out. It was a $5 bill. He carefully smoothed it flat. He wondered if it was real money or just play money. It looked real. That made him feel good. This was a lucky day. But then he felt bad. He knew that he never lost $5. He would cry and cry. Once he dropped a dime on the floor and it rolled into the heating vent. He never saw the dime again. What was it like to lose 50 dimes?
Stop.
That little sound at the end always throws me off because I think it's restarting, but it's just showing the end. So as you saw, the teacher is just sitting one-on-one with the student. She asked him to stop at the end of the minute and just marked the passage just by crossing a line. Well, she was using a digital version, but she just was marking out if the student missed the word. So there's no need to have any kind of complicated marking system. Either they got the word or they did not get the word. If the student comes back and self-corrects, you can mark the word as self-corrected, and then it would be counted as correct. So please remember that the ORF and the FLO provide 2 scores from the one assessment. One is the words per minute, which is just the sum of the words read correctly in 1 minute. So you would count up the number of words read correctly. You would not count the ones that were incorrect. And that's it. And the student only read for 1 minute, so that's the number of words read per minute. The other score is the accuracy percentage, which always makes me crazy as a teacher. That's, to me, like the harder one to do. And there are a lot of great calculators online. My favorite is Teacher Tools, and you just put in the numbers and it spits out your percentage. But if you love math, there is the diagram right there. So to figure out accuracy percentage, your accuracy is equal to words read correctly divided by the words read, the total number of words read, and you multiply that by 100 to get the accuracy percentage. Sorry if that was a convoluted thing. I am a humanities person and not a math person. Okay. So now let's look at the maze and the qual palabra. Remember, these are the same test, just one's in English and one is in Spanish. They have the same rules and procedures for delivery. And we can also follow a 4-step process for this. Step 1 is to get the maze passage for the correct grade level and time of year. You just need to have your materials. Step 2, now this is where it's different. You sit with a small group of students and follow the directions in the administration guide. So the maze and the qual palabra can be distributed in this, it can be administered in the small groups. You only administer it once, just to your little cluster of 4 or 5 students that you are thinking about for intervention. The students read and mark the passage for 3 minutes. And then you collect them and you score the maze for comprehension following the directions in the administration guide. The materials for this are a little bit more pages because each student gets a copy of the maze so that they can mark it with their highlighter or crayon or pen or pencil. So you have a teacher directions page, which we're going to go over in detail, and I will model how you read those directions. There is a teacher answer key, and then there is a student practice or student booklet. The student booklet is usually about 4 pages, so you could just copy it front back and then have that. And remember, it's only done 3 times a year. Okay. So administering and scoring this, there is on the very front page of the student booklet, there is a practice page. And so you start with everybody on the practice page so that you can do the work together. So you say, I'm going to give you a worksheet. When you get your worksheet, please write your name at the top and put your pencil down. You hand out the student maze worksheets. You make sure students have written their names because remember, you're going to collect them and score them, and nothing is more difficult than getting that back with no name. Then you say your directions. You are going to read a passage with some words missing from it. For each missing word, you will see a box with 3 words in it. Your job is to circle the word you think makes the most sense in the context of the passage. Let's look at the practice passage together. Listen as I read. And they have a page in front of them that just has like 2 or 3 sentences on it. Tom goes to a school far from his house. Every morning he takes a school art, bus, work to go to school. Let's stop there. Let's circle the word bus because I think bus makes the most sense here. Listen to how the sentence sounds now. Every morning he takes a school bus to go to school. Now it's your turn. Read the next sentence silently to yourself. When you come to a box, read all the words in the box and circle the word that makes the most sense to you. When you're done, put your pencil down. So then students practice the one you actively monitor because you want to make sure that they know how to follow the directions of the assessment so that you can start the 3 minutes. Then you would continue reading just as I've modeled here. Students would then get their 3 minutes to mark. After that, when you collect them, the scoring is the thing that seems complicated, but it's really not because you can get half-point scores. So sorry, I got fumbled up with my words here. Okay, so a response is marked correct if the student clearly circled or otherwise marked the correct word. So if you let them use highlighters or whatever, so if they mark the correct word out of the 3, it's correct. An incorrect is anything where the wrong answer is circled, or maybe they might marked more than one answer, or they left an item blank. So students might skip one within. However, items left blank after the last response are not counted as incorrect. So you only score what the student completed. So you might only end up scoring like the first page of it. So once you've scored it and you have your number of correct and number of incorrect, then you follow this little formula to figure out your answer. So Maze, you take the number of correct and the number of incorrect divided in half, and then you subtract that. So for example, let's say I got 5 correct and I got 4 incorrect. Well, 4 in half is 2. So 5 minus 2 is 3. So my score would be 3. You might end up with a half-point score, right? So let's say I had 5 correct, but I only got 1 incorrect. Well, half of 1 is half. So 5 minus half would be 4.5. So that's how you get that 4.5 score or 1.5 score. Okay. That was a lot of information, and you just got a lot of resources to look at. So during this pause and ponder, I want you to chat with your team. Are these assessments new to you? What will you need to prepare to administer them? And we will start the next section in 4 minutes. So this section on planning interventions will deep dive into the planning for the reading comprehension interventions. Hopefully by this point, you have a very solid understanding of what is reading comprehension, how do I qualify students for reading comprehension, and which assessments I would use to get to the point where I can then have my group and I can start planning for interventions. A big mistake we make in the upper grades is focusing too much on STAR when we refer to reading comprehension interventions. And many of the resources we find that we think are for reading comprehension are really just STAR prep workbooks. And they're not actually supporting students in building up knowledge and skills they need to comprehend. Reading comprehension lessons that strengthen and supplement grade level Tier 1 instruction will best support student learning by providing high quality, text-focused, knowledge-building opportunities that are connected to their Tier 1 instruction. These connections help reduce confusion of messaging and build skill competency by showing students clear paths to success. If you really love to read research, I highly recommend this article that's been linked in the chat about fostering and teaching reading comprehension. So that said, you're going to notice that the 3 resources we are strategically using for reading comprehension interventions are all connected and aligned to the Tier 1 instruction. We know that our students who have challenges need to hear and experience the learning multiple times. So when we are choosing things outside of that scope of reference, when we're pulling STAR passages, when we're pulling other items, we're confusing this messaging. We're giving them 2 different routes to think about when they're thinking about reading, instead of making a cohesive message that helps them expand their bubble, okay? We don't want to add to it, we want to expand it. When we purposefully choose these interventions and that have this repeat messaging in a different format, we're providing that additional opportunity, that additional hearing of the message, that additional practice point that connects them back to what they're doing. And when we're doing this through related text and expanding their knowledge base, we are giving those students a chance to be successful in class as well as during their interventions. So the 3 main resources we're going to use for reading comprehension interventions are the Read and Respond Journal, or the Cuaderno de Respuesta a la Lectura. This is one text that's provided for each week. It's aligned to the topic or theme and the skills from Tier 1 instruction. The foundational skills and destrezas fundamentales. So we're going to really actively use the resources that we have in whole group down in a small group setting, because students in intervention need to hear these messages in small group. And we're going to use the Rigby Readers Take and Teach lessons, or the Biblioteca Rigby's. So this is where we can choose that list of texts based on that lexile level, skill, topic, or genre needed. And we're going to make sure that we're focusing these choices of this text in our grade level text band and within the topic that we're learning about, so that we're expanding the knowledge base. We're constantly expanding this knowledge base for our students. As we go through each of these resources, we're going to follow a model, reflect, rehearse routine. So I will model shortly for you what the resource is, where to find it, what it looks like. Then I'm going to give you time in your teams or by yourself, if you happen to be sitting by yourself, to reflect on that resource and practice using it, maybe opening it up, thinking about how would I teach a page of this? What are some things that I would pull, or that if you might already have some specific students in mind that you might want to think about. So the first resource we are going to deep dive into is the Read and Respond Journal, or the Cuaderno de Respuesta a la Lectura. And Melanie has just dropped in the chat an example of both English and Spanish for this resource. If you've never seen these before, they look like this little picture here. There's clear images, chunked text, and text-dependent questions that are directly connected to the text above it. There's one text provided for each week. It is always aligned to the topic and skills from Tier 1 instruction. And I really appreciate the pre-sectioned text with questions and space for annotations. This really helps students look at how am I going to not just annotate a text randomly, but how can I focus my annotations on a text-dependent question? So we have these habits that we've taught students before, right? Go circle the title and make your predictions about the text on here and there. We really want to move away from that and focus our energy on text-dependent questions. So how would I use this? I would facilitate reading the text with a focus on vocabulary and discussion around for each page. Then I would construct sentence stems alongside the students and apply them through discussion and written responses. This construction of the sentence stems alongside the student helps build their capacity so that when you remove the support, they're not waiting for the sentence stem from you. They know how to start using those sentence stems on their own to get started, kind of filling up their bank with sentence stems. There's an opportunity also for progress monitoring with this, using the reread and respond questions on the final page. Now, don't worry about the progress monitoring. We're going to talk about that in detail in section 5. Now, where is this resource? This resource is linked in each week of the UPO under the Comprehension section of the Differentiated Small Group Resources. So this might be a resource that you use with some of your students during Tier 1, but during Tier 2 and 3 for interventions, we are purposefully, strategically using this resource. Because remember, during differentiation, it's a come and go. It's a flexible group, but this is purposeful, strategic usage. So now I'm going to give you 4 minutes in your teams. Actually, I'm going to cut that back to 3 minutes in your teams to reflect and rehearse the Read and Respond Journal, or the Cuaderno de Respuesta a la Lectura. Okay. All right. So let's look at the next resource that we can use for reading comprehension interventions. That's the foundational skills or the destrezas fundamentales materials. So what are these? So you have 1 grade level fluency passage and 2 decoding lessons per week with practice pages taught during Tier 1 instruction. And they look like this. Here's a practice page. So how would we use these? Oftentimes our students who need intervention need to hear something that they might have already heard before in a slightly different way in a small group setting. So you would reteach a decoding lesson and practice that fluency in small group in a very tightly guided way with that small group. And you can just use the weekly lesson from the UPO, and the resources, of course, you can always use. And we would strategically monitor this using a cold read at the beginning of the week and a hot read at the end of the week. And where are these resources linked? So the foundational skills materials are all linked in each week of the UPO under the foundational skills section or the destrezas fundamentales section. If you want a deep dive into that section of instruction, especially in our upper grades, I know some of us are not as familiar with foundational skills, but we can do it. You can teach foundational skills in the upper grades. I believe in you. Please take some time, if this is an area of growth for you, to watch our foundational skills lesson coaching video. During your reflect and rehearse, feel free to watch part of this sample fluency lesson that I've included in a video for you, or just go explore some of the materials and look at the directions to use. Oh, no.
Hi, students.
Nope.
This lesson is about reading with phrasing and decoding sounds
Read that.
and
Okay. Okay, here we go. Well, I'm just going to give you 3 minutes to meet in your groups for reflective rehearsal this time. Okay, coming into the last portion, the last resource that we're going to use, this is the big one. That's our Rigby Reader lesson, or the Biblioteca Rigby Lesiones, right? So there's a lot here, so just stay with me. So what are these? These are leveled reader sets that are aligned to the curriculum based on level, skill, lexile level, skill, topic, or genre. And you can find a larger Rigby library by module list. But we have also gone through, Manuel and I have put in the curriculum a picture where it shows what the texts are. And I'm going to show you what that looks like here in just a moment. But each text includes a take and teach lesson guide with 1 to 3 lessons and a comprehension quiz. Now, what you should find is that your Rigby readers, if you've never opened them before, they are in blue bins floating around your classroom or your school somewhere. And inside those bins, there are 6 copies of each text, along with a paper copy, a really nice paper copy of the take and teach lesson, the teacher's guide. These are the physical materials that you should have, and that is what you want to use in your small groups with your students. There are a lot of other ancillary materials that you can find online through HMH Ed, which is like the comprehension quiz. So how would you use these? This is always a tricky question because sometimes our inclination is to jump back to a different grade level, to a lower grade level when I am remediating reading comprehension. But I want you to remember the steps we took when we were moving towards reading comprehension interventions. And that very first step we took was to verify that the student had grade level fluency. And if a student has grade level fluency, then there is no need for us to go backwards in comprehension skills. We need to stay with grade level fluency. Stay with our grade level text in our grade level text range, and we need to provide scaffolds that support comprehension of that text, because we know reading it is not the problem. The comprehension is the problem. So we have to provide solid scaffolds to access grade level text. If we're always going back, then that is where we will always be. So you must provide scaffolds to move forward into the grade level text. If you are finding that you're on grade level text and the students cannot read it, then I would have you go back and check your diagnostics, because you might have missed a foundational skill or two that you need to go back and provide intervention for. So there's my soapbox on that. So choose from the list of text based on the grade level, the skills that you're working on, and that are connected to the topics and genres that you're currently working on in Tier 1. Remember, alignment of messaging helps build our knowledge base and reduce confusion. So then you would use the Take and Teach lesson guide to deliver small group instruction for at least 2 lessons. And I'm going to say always do at least 2, because the first lesson is just going to be understanding the text. You're going to focus on key ideas and details and vocabulary. And then the second lesson, you have an opportunity to dig deeper into a specific skill, like say character or things like that. And then you can always progress monitor using the Rigby comprehension quiz if you choose to. So where are these found? So like I said, the list of them that looks like this image that just came up on the screen, which lists the texts for that module, whether it's a book or a card, if it's fiction or nonfiction, the genre, the Rigby level, the lexile, which is what I would prefer you look at. Make sure you focus on the lexile, the number of pages, and then the types of lessons that are included in the Take and Teach lesson. So notice that some of them only have 1 lesson and it's just key ideas and details, but some of them have up to 3 lessons. So like one of them down here has character and figurative language specific lessons. So you can find the list of texts there, and then you have physical copies in your classroom. These are listed under the differentiated small group resources. You can also access the book, the lesson, the comprehension quiz, and some other resources on HMH Ed directly under Rigby Readers. So you have to change your little things. So instead of being an Into Reading or Arriba la Lectura, you have to be under Rigby Library or Biblioteca Rigby. Okay. And what do those look like? So after I've chosen a text from my list, I can pull the book. And don't be afraid of these longer books in your small group. Our students are ready for this challenge, and that is your job when you're pulling them for intervention, to help them access this complex grade level text. The Take and Teach lesson is multiple pages with wonderful text-dependent questions broken down in page sections, and then the comprehension quiz. Okay, so that was a lot because there's a lot there. So I'm going to give you a couple minutes to go explore some of the resources. Melanie has dropped a ton of them in the chat for the Rigby readers. And if you're on the slideshow, you can, and you want to see just this specific example from the book Shipwrecked, those are linked on the slideshow. All right. So now that we've looked at the three main resources, I want to take some time to look at how would we structure this in a 4-day lesson cycle. And you can see here the first lesson, the resource I would use would be the Stop in a Desert Read and Respond Journal. Here's my lesson. Now the lessons day to day or week to week would stay the same. What's best for your students is to set a routine that you're going to follow every week. It makes your planning easier, and it also helps them get used to, we know what we're going to do. There's nothing new. We can come into group and get started right away. So lesson 1, use the Read and Respond Journal to practice text-based discussion, annotation, and short constructed response. And then progress monitoring, I could use the reread and respond questions from the last page. When I move into lesson 2, you can see I have linked the shipwrecked take and teach lesson, and also the Heroes Come in All Shapes and Sizes fluency passage. So my lesson would be to use the Rigby Reader Take and Teach lesson focused on key ideas and details, and choose that lower Lexile grade level text with a focus on vocabulary and general comprehension, because I'm using key ideas and details. Notice that in progress monitoring here, I listed the fluency passage cold read. So I'm not going to teach a lesson on that fluency passage on that day. I might just be taking a moment to grab each of my students for 1 minute and do a cold read for that fluency passage just to see where we're at. On the lesson 3, I have the same take and teach lesson listed for the Rigby readers. And then I have the printable quiz, the comprehension quiz. So I would do a close reading with the comprehension skill using the Rigby reader from lesson 2. So I'm not picking a new text. We're doing a close read on the 1. And then I'd administer the comprehension quiz from the Rigby reader. Oh my gosh. I just clicked all over the place. Sorry. So my progress monitoring piece that day, if I chose, would be the comprehension quiz from the Rigby reader. And then lesson 4, I'm going to come back to that fluency passage. Remember, the fluency is kind of sitting in a funny spot because we're also doing fluency in our whole group, and I'm utilizing some small group time to just kind of reinforce and reteach if I'm noticing some small gaps there. So my lesson on that last day would be fluency and decoding reinforcement using the fluency passage from the foundational skills lesson. Oh my gosh, I did it again. I'm so sorry. And then I would want to do a hot read with that fluency passage to kind of just compare where we were at the beginning versus where we are at the end after we've done some practice. Just a note, and we're going to talk about this during progress monitoring, but I would not do all of these progress monitoring pieces. I might choose to do a few of them during the week as just practice opportunities, but each student would have a specific tool that I am using for progress monitoring based on their goal. So we'll talk about that during section 5. But right now, I want you to have some time to plan. Before you do that, I want you to take into consideration these 2 big things. One is, what is tier 2 and what is tier 3? So tier 2. Tier 2 would be that small group instruction of students who need a little bit of extra support. It's typically only 3 to 5 students, and it's 3 to 5 times per week with 20 minutes per session. The resources I just presented to you and the plan I just presented to you would be a more tier 2 focused lesson. Now, you can take that resource and you could push it into a tier 3 category, which means that the focus is intensive, individualized instruction for students with significant reading difficulties. Notice here that my group size reduces down to 1 to 4 students, and my frequency goes to daily with a duration of 45 plus minutes per session. Now remember that our intervention block is only 40 to 45 minutes, and that as a classroom teacher, you are sharing that block usually with math. So part of that, if I'm a classroom teacher delivering interventions, I am probably only delivering tier 2 style interventions because that's all the time I have. I only would have time for probably 1 tier 2 group for reading language arts because the other half of my block, I'm probably going to be intervening with math. So probably a specialist would be supporting you, or an interventionist would be supporting you in pulling students if there's a tier 3 need, just to kind of level set that. You would not be expected as a classroom teacher to deliver both a tier 2 and a tier 3 group within that space. Well, and one other thing is that decision about grouping and about who's delivering the intervention and the time that it would happen would be, that is the purpose of the CST meeting, is to have the people at the table to make the decisions. So if you're in that space, make sure you speak up and think realistically about the time that you have. Okay, so now you're going to go try it. I want you to go find resources for next week's intervention. So if you're third grade, you'd be looking for week 8. Fourth grade, third, all of them. Everybody's looking for week 8 because next week is week 8, right? Is that correct? I'm like so mind blown this afternoon. So, but here in the chat, we have linked a copy of the planning calendar for reading comprehension intervention. This is your copy. You can change it, you can add to it, you can do all sorts of fancy things. Maybe you only have time for 3 lessons, maybe you want to do 5, whatever you think would be helpful, but here is the lesson structure I would recommend. So I'm going to give you 3 minutes or so to go try that out and see how it goes. How does it go finding resources for next week? I hope you felt very successful with looking at the calendar and pulling some resources. I know we're getting some really wonderful questions in the Q&A about like, oh, I couldn't find this, or I found this that I'd never seen before, and how could I use that instead? So these are great questions. Please keep them coming in the chat, and then keep tabs. And I know that there's heavy collaborator usage, and hopefully we don't break this document. I heard that the UFly group broke the document, so I don't know, goals to break the document. For this last, or not last pause and ponder, but for this pause and ponder, I want you to reflect on what successes or roadblocks did you encounter when completing the planning calendar. And since I know so many people are already responding in the Q&A, I'm going to reduce the time for this one down to 2 minutes. So 2 minutes just to stop working on your calendar and think with a partner, successes or roadblocks. All right, we made it. We made it to the last section of the reading comprehension interventions, talking about progress monitoring. So as we get started with this, I want you to take into consideration some very important parts of progress monitoring. So do this, not this. First, choose a progress monitoring measure that matches the student growth area. A progress monitoring measure. Choose one thing that you're going to measure. Do not measure or progress monitor multiple different goals. That's overwhelming and unproductive. So choose one and focus on that. For example, in our case study earlier with Beatrice Bear, remember her grade level, she was just below grade level minimums for her fluency. She qualified for reading comprehension interventions, but was still lacking a tiny bit of fluency. So if I was choosing a goal and a progress monitoring measure for her, I would choose the fluency. I would choose fluency, and that would be the thing I would measure until it got to grade level, and then I might choose a different goal and progress monitor another piece of the comprehension puzzle. So do this, not this. Do keep a careful record of your progress monitoring. Make a folder for each student, have a cover page, keep the paper copies if you did, if they filled out a comprehension quiz, if they did the last page of the read and respond. Keep that careful paper record of the progress monitoring. Do not rely on your anecdotal notes or observation. Nothing makes a CST meeting go worser than coming in there and going, well, the other day I read with them and I heard them. Have your data, have the papers, be ready. It makes it go smoother and it wastes less of your time. Do this, not this. Do share your progress with your students. Do not keep the goals a secret from your students. Your students are your partners in learning. They are here to learn every day. They want to learn every day. And when you share what they're doing and you share the goals you've set for them, you have got them. You have got them ready, and they know what to do, not only when they're with you, but they know what to do to improve when they're not with you. So don't keep secrets, share goals with students. And if you've never had students color in their little fluency graphs, you're missing out because they love to do it. And the joy on their faces when they get to mark that goal instead of you is really a special moment. So do that. So how do we progress monitor our reading comprehension? Remember, we have 3 resources. And so we have 3 different tools, which each have a different purpose. We have the Read and Respond Journal, which we could use the last page of the Read and Respond Journal with those questions, the read and respond questions. We have the hot and cold reads from the Foundational Skills Fluency passages. And we have the Rigby Reader comprehension quizzes we can use. Now remember, any of these things that you're going to use as the progress monitoring measure, the student would need to do independently. So if you're going to use the reread and respond questions, that would be something they wouldn't be able to work with a partner. You'd need them to respond to those specific questions on their own. Or the comprehension quiz, they would have to kind of sit and do it on their own. Now you could deliver it in small group, but remember, fidelity of assessment when progress monitoring. If you didn't get to look at the last page of the read and respond journal, here's what it looks like. You've got short answer questions on the final page. The students work independently and apply the sentence stems and use the hint boxes to the questions next to the questions to respond in writing. Who would I use this for? So I would use this one for progress monitoring if the goal is improving written comprehension. So this might be students that maybe are a little more advanced on your comprehension scale and need just that little bit more. Foundational skills, just use the fluency passage. And you would use the rules that we used for ORF and for the FLO to track words per minute and accuracy rates from that weekly fluency passage. How would I do this? I would take a cold read on the fluency passage early in the week, the earlier the better, right, before they've seen it at all, and then a hot read using the same fluency passage later in the week. And they don't need to read the whole thing. You would use the same rules, right? 1 minute read, stop, count it up. Who would I use this for? So use this progress monitoring if the student goal is increasing to grade level fluency. So there's that small pocket of students who are below grade level fluency, but good on foundational skills. This is them. This is their thing. And then finally, the Rigby Reader lesson. What am I going to use? I'm going to use the comprehension quiz with the 5 multiple choice questions aligned to the Rigby Reader. I would have the students complete the comprehension quiz independently. Personally, I would have them complete it in small group because I want to see if they are tracking back into the text and using their strategies that we've been practicing during the week. And I would use this for progress monitoring if the student goal is more in that general comprehension route. And this is what they look like right here. So for tracking and recording progress monitoring data, you always want to keep a record. Track student progress and deliver that progress monitoring measure at least every 2 weeks. And keep a nice paper copy of that because that's the simplest way to do it. On whatever form or type of monitoring that works for you and the type of teacher and record keeper that you are. Do not keep it in your head. Make sure you get it written down. Make sure you keep some copies of the student work to validate your responses. And then also the second part of progress monitoring and tracking that data is entering it into ECST. So you will want to work with your campus administration to ensure that the proper documentation is in ECST and that the goals are set and everything is good to go. So this is our last, we've reached our final pause and ponder. Which progress monitoring route will you take? And what kind of support do you need? So I'm just gonna give you like 2 minutes to think about this question with your team. So we have reached the end of our reading comprehension interventions professional learning opportunity. And I'd love to close out with this beautiful quote from Rachel Jorgensen. It says, "Teaching is ultimately an act of hope. Every time I teach a lesson, I hope it will inspire learning. Every time I intervene with a struggling student, I hope it will change the trajectory of their path. The temptation to fall into cynicism is alive and well in education. However, hope is a choice I make every day." And I hope you choose to work with your students and have that positive attitude of leading them on the path towards success with their reading comprehension. If you are a friend who likes podcasts and reading about stuff, we have linked all around this quote here, some items that might give you some hope if you're feeling a little lost. My favorite out of here, I'm currently addicted to all of these Shanahan and literacy ones. Please check those out, especially for upper elementary. There's a lot of really good ones. And if you have never listened to Sold a Story, it will hurt your brain and your heart a little bit, but it's worth it. So please go into those, take some time, increase your learning as an adult. And thank you so much for being here. It is 2:29. I am right on time. Thank you so much. Please complete the feedback and attendance form for the session. And I enjoyed working with you all today. Thank you for the heart. Yay. I love some little hearts. I could tell it was after lunch, by the way. Y'all were very quiet with the reactions. And so I was like, am I talking to anybody? And they're like, oh, no, you have like 200 people in here. I was like, oh, okay. So thank you so much. Enjoy your final sessions. I think there's a couple more, right, at the very end of the day. So if you haven't been, why are there sad crying faces? I don't even understand the crying faces. Are you crying because it's over? I'm crying. I'm crying. Okay, so please have a lovely afternoon, and I hope everybody enjoys their weekend, and I hope you got Pled Day off. All right, bye.